right, we're live. Good day to everybody. Good day. Thanks for joining, Guus.
Thank you. Thank you.
And everybody else for joining. So today we have a session on citizens development with automated change control. The session is offered by ServiceNow together with our partner Platformation, which is a worldwide dedicated ServiceNow partner. And Guus and myself, Jules, we will be your hosts for today. And together we'll show an example of how to streamline governance for distributed development. In our examples, we'll be using App Engine Studio, which is actually designed for distributed development. And we'll use the included automated deployment features or possibilities to show the capabilities for change control. During the session, all the participants are muted. So if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll try to answer them directly, or otherwise we'll do them in the Q&A at the end. During our session, we'll have some poll questions, so feel free to provide us with some feedback. And first, have a look at the agenda for the next hour. So here we go. We'll do a little bit of introductions of ourselves. And then Guus will start with telling us a little bit more about distributed development, or citizens development, as it's popularly also called. So what is it? Why would you use distributed development or citizens development? And how will you or can you be successful with citizens development? And then we'll introduce our demo scenario and walk you through it step by step. We start by requesting access for building a scoped application, and then explain how you can collaborate within building and how to enable that in App Engine Studio. And finally, we'll show you how we use automated deployments for enabling a change process. And then at the end, we'll finish with Q&A. So Guus, I'll first introduce myself. And of course, after that, I'll hand over to you.
Wonderful.
So my name is Jules Wijters, part of ServiceNow. I'm part of the Creator Workflows team within ServiceNow. Sorry, I have to use the clicker. I'm trying to switch the slide, sorry for that. So part of the Creator Workflows teams for EMEA North as a solution consultant. So my day-to-day actually consists of helping our customers with the capabilities of our low-code application development platform. And I'm 2 years in with ServiceNow at the moment. So Guus, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. So, well, my name is Guus Hutschemakers. If you can manage to pronounce that as a native English speaker, that's a nice achievement. Indeed, I work for Platformation almost 6 years already, and as we are indeed a dedicated ServiceNow partner, I've also been working with ServiceNow for 6 years. I've been really focusing on the topic of DevOps, from which the perspective of automated deployments is, of course, very relevant. And now also working a lot with new product development, where actually App Engine is fitting in perfectly. So this automated deployment for App Engine Studio is actually right the sweet spot of those two worlds combined. So that's it for me.
So I think the first section is yours.
Yes, exactly. So indeed, what is citizen development or distributed development, and who are those people? So what we see happening in the world, of course, is that platforms like ServiceNow and many other platforms are offering more and more low-code capabilities, and this is great because it allows people that are not dedicated developers with a lot of technical experience to also, in fact, build applications. The advantage of which is, of course, that those people could be building stuff that they will use for their own, and they also understand very well what they need because they need it themselves. And for this, you need a low-code platform, and today we will, of course, focus on ServiceNow as a low-code platform. And the people that are typically the citizen developers could be business analysts that work with a lot of systems, could be engineers that have a technical background for their own and therefore are easy with the tools. or actually any other business user that is making use of apps and knows their way a little bit in a low-code platform. So that is indeed the citizen developers. And I think actually that takes us right to the first poll. So I think the poll should be coming up now as I will read out the questions. So are you using ServiceNow already as a low-code platform, and how? Right. So there's a few options we have, and you could be maybe a ServiceNow customer, but not really using the custom development features yet. So for example, more using the ITSM module or the CSM module or any of the other standard modules. Another option is that you are using ServiceNow and the app engine capabilities to actually build applications that tailor to your business needs. But at the moment, only ServiceNow developers, experienced ServiceNow developers get to build that. Another option is that you do indeed have teams and users close to the business or in the business that are in fact already maintaining their own applications, which I think we could safely call citizen development, according to the definition. Or maybe you don't have ServiceNow yet, but you're just here out of interest, which is of course also interesting to learn. And I think also if you give all these answers, we also understand a little bit better what audience we have in front of you, and maybe we're able to tailor our comments and stories a little bit to that situation.
Yeah, hopefully everybody got a chance to answer the question, and let me see the results. So I'm now maybe waiting a little bit more, so to make a little bit excited. So what's going to happen? So let's look at the results. So overall, it's actually the second option was chosen. 56% of people attending is using App Engine capabilities, or the organization is already using it to customize and develop new functionality. But mostly it's dedicated for ServiceNow developers, which was to be expected, I think, Guus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that also...
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
And the second one was that they are ServiceNow customers, but they haven't really tried custom development yet. And to be honest, 4% of the respondents actually have teams of users that are close to the business and that build and maintain their own applications. So I think that also reflects what we think. We see customers interested in citizen development, but it's just starting. So hopefully this will help to start up more of those programs.
I think it's also indeed in line with what we see at our customer base, that this is sort of the moment that people are getting really into it. And I think it's also the right moment, because I think if we look at also the efforts of ServiceNow to make the low-code features more accessible to citizen developers has really taken a large boost in the past year. So I think actually it's the perfect time to get onto this. So yeah, great.
We actually had a second question prepared. So maybe you wanted to understand how much time is being spent by ServiceNow developers or administrators, if you are aware of those numbers, on very simple changes. Think about simple updates, adding a field to a form, creating a new report, creating an email notification, or something as a catalog item, which is a simple configuration on ServiceNow. So the idea is to get an estimate of how much time is spent by dedicated ServiceNow developers on those kind of activities. Because maybe, and that's of course a leading question, this could be done by other people in the organization. Right, Guus?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, this is something that we see very often with our customers, that the core ServiceNow team at the customer has a huge backlog of stuff that they're typically working on, and often more than half of those things are in fact very simple things that probably people in the business could easily do themselves. They just don't have the access or the tools to do so. So this is, yeah, indeed the relevance of citizen development could be shown here.
I already clicked the results, so who didn't vote was too late. So no time at all is actually 0%. So that makes sense, I think. Some, but less than 20% is actually at 27%. But most of the organization, and it's tied around some, but less than 20%, and between 20 and 50%. So for the people who have a clue about how much time is spent, most of the time is spent between less than 20 and between 20 and 50. So it's not huge, but it can be quite an effort, quite a burden on the ServiceNow administrators or the ServiceNow developers.
Yeah, and it can also really withhold those people from actually building the really nice, cool new features or implementing the new functionalities that are available. And if they're stuck updating forms all the time, and that keeps people from using those cool things. So that's
and what's interesting,
yeah,
5-6% even answered that there was more than 50% of the time spent on those activities, which of course is kind of a waste.
Yeah, absolutely. So indeed, why citizen development? I think we've already been hinting on this in the previous things that we said, but there are a lot of advantages, of course, but these are the main 5 advantages that we see. So the speed of delivery, right? If people are able to just do it themselves when they need it, it's usually much faster than if you have to put a request in the queue and wait for the team to actually have the time to pick it up. So there is a great benefit to be gotten there. And next thing is the inherent process alignment. So what we see very often is that when business users write out their requests, and a developer builds it and then shows it to the business user, it turns out that they didn't really understand well what the business user was meaning, or the business user maybe didn't specify very well what the objective was. And then you waste a lot of time on the back and forth between who wants it and who builds it. And of course, if the person who uses it also builds it, then there is inherent alignment there. Also, this we see a huge demand for automation requests. So this is of course the digital transformation, as we call it, and with the shortage of skilled IT people, this is often becoming the bottleneck for the digital transformation. So there's a lot of potential benefit there. And of course, if you leave the simpler stuff up to the citizen developers, then actually your skilled developers can focus on more interesting stuff, which is nice. And finally, and maybe my favorite one, by providing all these people and users with a platform to build their own tools, you really provide them with a platform to innovate and to create cool new things that, first of all, they might be using themselves, but eventually they could be used throughout the organization. So that's something really nice. So moving on. Of course, citizen development or distributed development is not without challenges, right? So first of all, if this really starts taking off, then there is a huge demand for people who would want to build their own app. This is actually what we see at customers. And then, of course, if you let people that have no particular professional app building experience build their own apps, how do you sustain the quality, right? That it does stay good quality applications. Also, of course, there's the question of managing deployments, right? Do you give all your citizens admin access in production? Probably not. But then, do you still rely on the other team to manage all the deployments? Well, those are interesting questions. And finally, of course, who will actually support the applications once they are live? And there's, of course, the maintenance activities. So overall, and there's this nice quote that we got from one of our customers. He says, citizen development is easy to set up, but it's very difficult to sustain. So for that reason, actually, governance is key, right? So focusing on the intake, the architecture, the delivery of the apps, how to deploy them and how to support them. Those are actually the key questions to make your citizen development or distributed development practice successful. And of course, there's a lot of elements to governance, and it's not a very easy question. But what we can provide from ServiceNow perspective is at least a couple of tools that really help you support that governance. And in fact, we've created a citizen development program that contains a lot of different possibilities and tools and aids to help establishing a successful citizen development practice. And of course, we only have an hour today, so I cannot talk about everything. But what we will be focusing on today is actually the elements that help providing a good governance. So that's supporting in build and design, a guided intake process, how to set up maybe a center of excellence, and having the flows to automatically do quality assurance and deployment. And all of that is, of course, part of or linked to the App Engine Studio, which is available in ServiceNow. And then I hand it back to you, Gilles. Yeah. Tell us all about App Engine Studio. What is this magical thing that we've been talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Guus. Thanks for the background. And now let's go a little bit more deeper into our demo scenario. One indeed that we have based on App Engine Studio. Of course, my clicker now went away. There it goes. Which is basically the development environment on ServiceNow. So we specifically created this low-code distributed development environment to support and combine a number of configuration capabilities that we already offer on our platform, and basically create a more guided experience. So it's all tailored towards different types of developers. The idea is that you can actually collaborate, work together on developing applications, while each of those developers has their own permission sets based on their capabilities, and of course granted access based on their responsibility. So if you only need to create reports, you only get access to the reports because that's the only scope of work that you have. If you're a very experienced developer, you might be able to create integrations, use some of the out-of-the-box spokes, but the idea is that each has their own set of work, and that you can tailor the specific permission sets in App Engine Studio to do the work that you need to do the work in the scope of the project. Of course, it's built on the platform, so it offers all the platform capabilities and building blocks. But we're not going to go into an in-depth demonstration of App Engine Studio today. For those who want to see more of App Engine Studio, we'll have another session on the 16th of March, where we go more into App Engine Studio specifically. So for today, I wanted to introduce our demo scenario. And we first kick off with providing access to App Engine Studio based on a request that is sent to the portal. So as a user, you want to create, or as a developer, you want to create an application, you have an ID for an application, and through the portal, those requests are then streamlined. And based on some of the criteria that you specify in the request, you either get direct access to App Engine Studio to build your application, or you are first approached by the Center of Excellence based on the required support you need. There's one other requirement that we see is that you, as an organization, train your developers before they get access to ServiceNow. Whether you train them specifically on App Engine Studio, but maybe you would also want to train them on some of the standards that you have in your organization for ServiceNow development, and explain some of the platform intricacies that you have on ServiceNow.
Yeah, and I think maybe worthwhile mentioning there, this is not something that you necessarily have to build from the ground up. Actually, ServiceNow provides a very rich amount of training materials on the developer portal, but also in the learning portal. Yeah, so those assets are just available.
Yeah, and I know an example of one of our customers who actually built the certification in guided setup. So as a customer, as an training, you go to the guided setup that actually shows you some of the capabilities on the platform. And once you've been through that guided setup, you get certified and you are allowed access to development or catalog management on the platform. So let's go into our demo. And then I'm gonna go share my screen first. And I have to do the right one, this one. All right, there we are. So first of all, I want to start up with my production portal. So on my production portal, this is where I will ask access or share my ID on building an application. So it's part of our service catalog, but for this case, I actually made a direct link for developing a ServiceNow application. By the way, for those of you who have not seen this, this is Employee Center, basically the new portal as part of the ServiceNow platform. In our case, when I request or when I follow the request, I end up on the development portal because my application will go live on development. It's not a requirement. You could also do it on production and then make sure that the application is being built or sent to development, but your application is always built on development. So I'm going to provide a name for my application. It's called Desire. What's going to be the purpose? I want to add a new catalog item. And of course, catalog is with an O. I can then specify the complexity. The way we have set it up is that you have a number of options, only 3. So it's either simple, some support, or full support needed. Based on these options, a flow will kick off that will look at the decision tree. So with Decision Builder, we build a decision tree that will decide on the combination of the complexity, on the supporting team, and if you are and whether you are certified. If you will get direct access, the application will be auto-approved, or that somebody from, for example, the Center of Excellence or a ServiceNow developer or a ServiceNow administrator will contact you first to see if they can help build the application. And of course, if you're not certified, you could automatically send an email with links to all of the certification necessary, either on the ServiceNow Learning Now portal or the developer portal, or something that you have internally. So for now, we'll keep it simple. I'll make it the supporting team, the App Engine admins team, and I'll specify that I'm already certified. So based on these selections, our request will auto approve. And what other thing that I will do, I want Guus to collaborate with me on this application. So I immediately select Guus, and I can select more collaborators, but Guus will be my co-developer, so he will hopefully also get access to my application. So I will submit, and this will start up the request. And if we wait a little bit, because it's auto approved, we will see that the request is actually being processed and fulfilled. And of course, normally it goes really quick.
But this is a demo, so then everything.
This is a demo, so it takes some time. So what also happens is that as an administrator, you have a dashboard available to you. I'm sorry, I'm switching. I had too many tabs open, so I'm switching screens. And we have a dashboard available as an administrator or ServiceNow platform owner or ServiceNow Center of Excellence, where you can see the status of the requests. So an overview of all the requests coming in. And what we'll show later on is that there's also deployment request. In this case, a colleague of mine has built this as a scoped application. So it's something built specifically for this demo as a custom application, but the same functionality will be part of our San Diego release. So in San Diego, there will be a ServiceNow built out-of-the-box application management dashboard. So if all went well, and we do have 2 application requests, it already came in. And as you can see, my application Desire is now close complete. So the actual request has been fulfilled. And because of my selections, it's automatically provisioned for me. What we have done in our demo is that we also create a CI. So we will create an application CI that will live on production for the application that we create. So next step is to switch to Guustink to explain a little bit more about building the application and collaborating on the application.
Yeah. Perfect. Right. I need to. Yeah. Perfect. Indeed. My clicker here. So indeed. So how do you make sure that that all of this goes well when you have the citizen developer? Of course, they have taken the training, but that doesn't mean that they will immediately be able to build a good app. So for that, there's a few tools that can be provided to the citizen developers to help them out. And actually, of course, there are a couple of tools and that are available by ServiceNow, right? We have the reusable components, we have integration blocks, those sort of things, and we have the App Engine Studio, which provides a very nice UI to actually build your own apps. But besides that, what is really important is to really help them out on a bit more deeper level. To provide, for example, build and design support. Even though people might have a good idea and they've got the basics, very often what we see is a good idea if they have easy accessible support to somebody who is experienced in it. If they run into something small and they just have a very easy access to the experienced people, getting help from an experienced person for just 1 or 2 minutes can already help them overcome a simple obstacle and then move on. So that is really useful. So that's, for example, the build support. Similarly, you would have the design support where you're talking about if I have an idea for an app, how should I construct it? Those sort of things that are very useful. And of course, as your community of citizen developer grows, also the amount of people that can actually support the new citizen developer can also grow. And so really building that community of practice, make sure that it's also sustainable in the long run to keep growing this practice. Of course, when the app is actually in place, it is nice to make sure that you have some quality assurance in place. And in a later stage, we will already show a little bit what that might look like. But in the end, this can be a combination of automated and potentially manual checks that before you actually move it to production or something of the likes, that you run a couple of automated scans to validate best practices, to check that nothing breaks because of this deployment, and perhaps also do a manual review by one of the architects, for example, or one of the more experienced people to actually view whether that app is complying to the standards or not. And of course, what Jules already showed is that you can add collaborators, that you actually work together and collaborate on a single app, and that's where you can actually also make a combined team of maybe a citizen developer and an experienced developer to actually jointly build that app. So then I think we can move on to actually showing that. My clicker doesn't seem to be working. Yes, now it did work. Yes, so indeed, let's go into the demo and actually build that app. So let me go and share my screen. Make sure I get it right.
And sorry, Guus, brought you in trouble. I have some bad network quality, so.
No problem. Okay, so I actually I go into the development environment. I open App Engine Studio, and in there I'm going to look for Desire. Oh, there.
I actually called it our desire when I did it the second time. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. So here we have our App Engine Studio UI, where we have a lot of possibilities. We have the possibility to add additional collaborators. We have the possibilities to link to source control. And we also have this submit button, which I will use in a minute. But for now, of course, I need to actually build something into our application. Of course, there's a lot of different things I can do, but for now, I will start with adding that catalog item, which we were talking about, to actually help people getting their desire. So as you can see, there's a nice step-by-step guided approach to allow you to build your application. So let's say the item is called. We had a nice name in mind. Jules, help me out here.
Yeah, of course. I also forgot. What?
No.
That's the question, right? So.
Right, that's true. Then I'm going to call it wishful thinking. And I could provide a short description if I wanted to, but I think for now this is fine. And then we have our initial item. So of course I want to edit the item because an empty item is not very useful. And in addition to the item name, I can, for example, give it a little image. Let's see, should have a nice image there of the devil. That's nice. So then I will continue to the location. So I need to specify where will my request be available. So I think I can go to the service catalog.
Yeah. And I know where to find it.
Yes, very good. Sorry, your head was floating in front of the submit button, Jules. So I had to move you around a little bit. Let's put it in. Can we help you? And then saving select. As you can see, it just takes you through step by step. So of course, a little guidance can be helpful, but on its own, it's simple enough for most people to just use this. So let's add a question, right? Single line text seems to be good. So the question would be, what is it that you truly desire? Right. Spell it correctly. The name will be automatically populated. It's not visible. And maybe we can make this question mandatory. So move on to the additional details. I don't think we need to do text validation. But of course, if you're asking for an email address or phone number or those sort of things, you can actually provide additional details. For now, just inserting the question. And well, there's a lot of more access and settings that I can do, but for now, the only thing which is really required is to select which flow to use for the fulfillment. And of course, you can create your own flow if needed, but in this case, I'm just going to go with the service catalog item request. So now I get the summary. I can review everything that is there. Looks all good to me. So I'm going to submit this item. And then I can return to my application. Now, of course, normally if you build an app, you would probably build it out a little bit more. But for now, I'm going to submit this app to actually show that automated deployment process. So when I click submit, we can also see that there's certain steps that will be taken when I submit it, right? So first, it requires, of course, that you actually test it and that everything works as expected. I'm going to skip that for now, as developers usually do, because I know I built it right, so why would I test it? Of course, then there will be a health scan, and actually there's an automated test that's also running on the test environment, after which it will be published and deployed. So I'm just going to submit it now. That will trigger a nice flow in the background. course, I have to provide some additional information. So in this case, the release notes, first deployment of.
And if you would have used source control, these comments will also be added to your source control. So it will be commit, a version commit or a tagged commit in source control with the same comments that you just added.
Perfect. So now the application is submitted for review. That triggers a nice flow in the background, which I believe Jules will show after we've introduced our next slides, which is on governing the app deployments.
Yeah, thanks, Guus. So Guus has just submitted the application for deployment. Deployments using App Engine Studio are governed on the platform using Flow Designer. So it's called a deployment pipeline, and Flow Designer requires input from the pipeline configuration. First of all, it needs a source, right? So it needs a development environment where deployments originate from. So the moment you submit it, basically that was the source, the development source that will be input for the deployment. Next, that pipeline will have one or more environments connected to it. Minimal, it should be production, because production really is the orchestrator in the whole deployment process. So that's where all the actual flows will run that will trigger and control the deployment. And of course, you have the option to use a test environment, and you can, of course, also use additional environments. So the more environments you need, basically deployment will take place on those environments as well. So you set up the environments and you set up the credentials to access the environment. So you connect credentials to the environments so that the flows can connect to the environments and then do deployment.
So effectively, this is a CI/CD pipeline built natively on ServiceNow.
Correct. It's actually using the CI/CD API that we provide on our platform, and it's also using the application repository. So it's using all of our newer deployment capabilities to execute the deployments and control the deployments. The actual deployment itself is determined by the pipeline type. And what you do is in a pipeline type is you specify a subflow. So that means that your pipeline type is configurable. What we did, Guus and myself, is create our own subflow based on the original subflow that is part of App Engine Studio. And we added some additional steps, some additional controls into that flow. So part of the things we did was change that we auto-approve, for example, deployment on a test environment, and that we create a change that can be approved so that to go to production. So out of the box, after you set up the configuration, there is a subflow that will do deployment. So submit will work. And if you want to change something in the way the deployment is being run, it means you have to tailor that subflow and create one of your own. And what will then happen? So pipeline execution will actually mean that the submit that Guus did on development is then is being done from App Engine Studio, and this will push something called a deployment request into production. So on the controller, our production environment, a deployment request is created. We will look also into that in the demo. And that deployment request needs to be approved first by an administrator for deployment on test. That's the standard process in App Engine Studio. What we changed, Guus and myself, is that we want the application to be deployed directly on test environment. So we don't need approval from an admin. We actually auto-approve the deployment and then push that change to the test environment. Together with that, we actually execute an instance scan, and we execute an ATF test suite. This is optional. We included it in our flow. It's part of the standard flow as well. So if you enable ATF tests and if you have instance scans available on your environment, you can run them as part of your first assessment on the test environment. These can be tailored, so the ATF test suite can include your own tests, your own specific functional test for your application. And of course, it can also include generic tests. The same with the instance scan. You can add your own plugins or checks to the instance scan that are specific for your environment, your operations, and your guidance on developing applications in your specific environment. After that is being executed successfully, the application is available on the test environment. And like I said, it's driven by Flow Designer, but Flow Designer uses the CI/CD API that is available on our platform to do the actual deployment. And first it's publishing it to the application repository. And the next step is then installing it, in this case, on the test environment. Once it's live, it's up to the QA team to do the validation on the test environment and then give approval for deployment on production. If validation fails, of course, it will not move to production and potentially go back to the developer to do changes. Once everything is validated and approved, the application is free to move to production. In our case, so in the standard case, it's just once again an administrative approval. In our case, we actually create a change before that needs to be assessed before anything can happen on production. That means typically that a different team will look at the change, validate the change before everything goes to production. That means that everything is auditable, so there will be a track and trace about who provisioned what to production at what time, who approved it, and what validations have been assessed. So I think the next will be to do the actual assessment on our test environment. Oh, first we have a poll question, of course. I forgot about that one. So next poll question is about the changes in your ServiceNow environment. So if you do custom development, and we had, I think, quite a large number of our audience actually doing development on ServiceNow, how do you propagate those changes from test to production, or maybe directly to production, depending on your process? So there are a number of options. Of course, update sets you can still take. Maybe you already use the application repository or not. Do you do it manually? Has it already been automated, yes or no? So please guide us a little bit on what is the common practice on your platform these days.
And maybe as we give people the time to answer this poll, there's also, I think, a very relevant question from the audience at this moment. It is, can we use CI/CD to deploy update sets as well, where we capture the development work like catalog, scripts, business rules, etc.?
Yeah, so you can always create your own script. So you can tailor your process, right? So the API that we provide has a number of actions. For example, installing plugins, batch installs for plugins, besides installing application content. But in any CI/CD pipeline, you can include your own steps. So if you want to do it based on update sets, or if you want to include other tests and ATF test cases, you are free to include them. And I think you have experience with that, Guus, or Platformation has experience with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually what we see as a best practice when it comes to making changes to, for example, an existing module, right? So of course it's possible to use update sets, but when it comes to automating deployments in the CI/CD manner, what we see that really works best for the customers is to actually use the concept of global apps. So this is very similar to the scoped app. It's also stored in the application repository, and you can also trigger the use and deployment of the global apps through the CI/CD APIs or a CI/CD pipeline in ServiceNow. So for that concept, we really recommend to use global apps as a replacement of update sets. But I think in the end, we have a little bit more information about that, so we'll get to that.
Yeah, and I just published the results. So, whoa, a whopping 65% is still manually migrating changes using update sets. That's a bit more than I expected, Guus. I don't know from you.
No, actually, it doesn't really surprise me. I see this actually. This is also sort of a representation of how our customers still do it a lot. It's also, of course, a matter of habit, and it actually works fairly well. So why change a winning team, right? But what we also see is that the customers that do make the move, that they are really happy with the more streamlined version of deploying stuff using CI/CD and application repository. And yeah, if you're really mature, even the source control and those sort of features.
So why would you do it, Guus? I think it's because to improve the process of doing deployment, right? Make it less error prone. Unattended means you don't have to spend time on it. So
Yeah.
there are benefits to do this, right?
Definitely, and also in terms of versioning and making sure that that you have the right versions. And actually, I think the point you mentioned, error prone, is really the biggest benefit, because I think everyone who's deploying using update sets, you're probably all familiar with the moment that you are previewing the update set, and then you get a lot of errors and conflicts, and that you have to resolve those. So this is really something that you can in fact avoid there. Yeah.
Right. All right, let's continue with our work in progress. So let me share my screen again. That will help. If I can find it again. So there it is. Let me get everybody back. So one thing that failed, of course, we do a demo, live demo. The first time the deployment or the request for my application failed. So I showed you something that was incomplete and closed. What should have happened, and that happened the second time when I created our desire, is that I would have gotten feedback on my request that it was approved. Of course, email will be sent out. That's the easiest way to inform people that something is ready for them. But there's also a link directly to the project that Guus opened in App Engine Studio. But let's go back to our central and see what we got in. So our environment is now updated with a deployment request. So you can see that I have our desire, which is the application that Guus and I built, which is now in review. This is called a deployment request, and it's now sent to my production environment, where it actually is already deployed on test, to correct me. So it's sent to production as a deployment request, but the application itself is already deployed on a test environment. So that's why we set the state of the application to in review. And you can see that Guus already has a change attached to his application that he submitted. And it actually points us to the next target environment, that is the production instance. So this will be the environment where it will in the end land. We have feedback from the actual deployment itself. So like we said, we have the instance scan executed. We have the ATF test being executed. So I can open the links to actually review this information and see what happened, especially when it failed. That might be important. Information about where it's being deployed is also available. Unfortunately, this seems to be an issue in Workspace, because if I do restore defaults and get the same filter, I actually see the deployment environment showing up. So we can see that it's now being deployed on my test instance. And once it's deployed on production, it will also show production. So to continue, I need to assess the change request. I can open it from my deployment request, but typically it will be a different team, so they will have their own workspace to look at change requests. It's set to new because it's just being created, and it has the information about our configuration item that is already available. So like I said, we create a configuration item, but it's now a non-operational one because the application is not live in production. It actually is only been in development. So the application is non-operational and it's not versioned and it's not installed. But to do that, we actually need to assess the change, and I save that. And I can see the CI, basically the application that is connected to it. I can see the original deployment request. So as a QA team, I can look at the deployment request and results of it. We have attached for ease of use the link to the actual scan results. So I can click on my results. And this will link to my test environment, because what deployment does, it deploys first on test, which means that the scan and the ATF tests are also run on a test environment. So the results will point me to my test environment, and here I can look at the results from my test suite. So if something had failed, I could look into why it failed, and I could give feedback to the developer to redo some of his work. So the next step is actually to approve this because I'm happy with the results. It deployed correctly, my scan concluded correctly, and I've done the QA. So I looked at the application on test, I did the review. So for me, or for Guus, I actually picked Guus. I'm going to approve. Sorry, Guus. I'm going to impersonate you for now.
Yeah.
So Guus has approved the change. And this will then set the application to authorize. It means that the QA team has authorized that it's up to standards. And the next step will be that an additional approver is necessary for the production support team. And this always takes a little bit of time. So let me refresh. And you can see that I now have 8 approvers. So I take the role of the production support team, and I'm going to say that the application is now ready to be deployed on production. So I save this. So everything is auditable. Sorry, go ahead, Guus.
Yeah, and I think this is nice. So for now, we've configured this to be a manual approval, which sort of allows you to keep sort of control over what is being deployed to production and not. But what we also see in some scenarios that, for example, by qualifying a certain app as a low-risk app, that you could also automate these approvals or skip through them, right? So if a certain team maintains their own item and they have their own responsibility for it, you may want to skip these type of approvals if, of course, and then you have your test results. If all the test results check out and there's no issues found, you can also configure it, of course, to automatically move on and not having to go for the approvals. It's really a matter of what fits your organization.
And by default, the deployment is scheduled. So you can set a schedule, for example, that it will run in the evening so that it doesn't interfere with actual office hours or working hours. But for now, we want to have result quickly. So I'll click on implement so that I can implement my change directly. What will happen? We had a flow still waiting, the deployment flow still waiting on approval. So by approving the change, the deployment will now continue, and it will take a little bit of time. But now it will actually use Flow Designer to kick off deployment on production. Once again, it's using the application repository. So it means that there are no changes because it's the same source in the application repository that we deployed on test. That's the idea about application repository. The same assets that you have on your test environment are now versioned and also deployed on production. And as you can see, it's now published. And we have also now our application CI available. So what we created in our process is create something called a ServiceNow application CI that we call our desire, that has now the version of the application and the install date. It's now installed on production, so it's linked to the instance. And we also created a specific CI that is called a ServiceNow instance that has the instance information, in this case from our ServiceNow instances. But that means that there's a lot of auditing and tracking and tracing about which application lands where, who approved it, and when did all this happen.
Yeah, and indeed, that's taking away a huge administrative burden already for actually manually creating all those changes, which is, of course, something that actually nobody likes to do, and that results in either people not doing it or people spending a lot of time on it. And of course, if you automate it, you know that it's always consistently done, and you also know that the quality of data is also consistently good. So that's that's a great
and let's
way.
see if we actually can deliver on the promise that we have now. The application, oh, of course, not this one. This is for the initial start. I want to get access to my catalog, and if all went well, then can we help you should have our wishful thinking app. So we actually have done a production deployment, mostly automated and approved by that change that we actually implemented. And now I could fill out what I truly desire and hand over to Guus.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks. So indeed, if we or when we have the slides back, indeed. So summarizing, what is it that we are doing, that we've been doing? Well, we've seen citizen development is on the rise, or distributed development, and it's going to be there and it's going to stay, I think. What we've seen, governance is of the essence, And to make that governance a little bit easier and better, it's good to use automation and self-service to help supporting that governance process. Of course, App Engine Studio already provides the basics to allow you to do all those things. And what we've added now in this demo is the automated self-service to request a new app, and the automated integration to change control to automatically create the change and attach all the evidence. So that's what we've been looking at so far. Now, this has been a example of how it can be implemented. What I think is worth pointing out is that this is indeed leveraging ServiceNow as a CI/CD tool, but in many organizations, in fact, there are already other CI/CD tools in use, or perhaps even the golden standard. So if you're, for example, using Azure pipelines to manage the deployments of most of your applications, you can in fact also use Azure pipelines to basically follow the same process as we've now shown in ServiceNow for deployments, but then using an external CI/CD tool where you also do the code versioning and maybe a little more advanced processing of all the different steps. Also, that of course can be integrated to change management, and for that there is actually the ServiceNow DevOps app available, which allows you to automatically manage that change control and to do it that way. So just to point out that we've shown a example, but there's many more ways that this can go.
And to be clear, this is using the same capabilities, right? The CI/CD API and the application repository. The only thing is the pipeline itself is driven not by Flow Designer, but by Azure or Jenkins or whatever you want to use.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have 4 minutes left for questions. It's not a lot, but I think please go ahead and submit your questions if you have any left. Don't withhold for the questions. If we don't get to answer them now, we can also always answer them later.
I guess that's one interesting question that I see pop up is, what if I have changes to my application?
Yeah. Oh, right.
Deploy.
Yeah. So I think effectively it follows the same process. So we could just quickly make a change to just show that. I'm not sure. Right? Shall I give it a try?
Yeah, sorry, the sound dropped off a little bit.
I think we can manage to make the change in 3 minutes, right? Shall I give it a try?
I have to go through the whole process then, in the backend as well.
Yeah, no, so the requesting of the app is not needed anymore. But here what we see is that if, for example, I make a small change to the application, let's say I want to add a question there, maybe a new question, maybe do a choice and do a multiple choice. So I surrender my soul. Would be a nice one. And then
I'll try to answer another question while you do this, Guus.
Absolutely.
Because well, at least feedback, it was a great session. Thank you. And can the CI/CD aspect be leveraged on the Rome instance, or is there a dependency on San Diego release? Now, of course not. Everything we demonstrated, actually, it was on Rome. So our instances are all Rome instances for now. The demo instances that we used, none of them have moved to San Diego. So all the capabilities that you saw, or all the capabilities that we talked about, are available on Rome. The only thing that we did, or that a colleague of mine did, is build that specific dashboard or workspace for distributed development. So the central overview, where all the application requests and the deployment requests come in, is something that a colleague of mine custom built. That's the only part that in San Diego will come out of the box that you don't have in Rome yet. But the application request itself and the deployment requests are still available. The only thing is that that you have to create the whole process around it, especially for the application request. You still have to create that. Deployment request work out of the box. So that's something that's available already there.
Yeah.
You did submit it, Guus?
I did submit it.
I see a new comment request.
Yeah, okay, maybe you can share that.
I will try. So hopefully my screen is visible again. We have now, and we can see nicely that there's one R Desire version 101 that is already published, and we have a new that's now in review, which will be on test again. So let's quickly go to the change. And of course, deployment failed.
It's still waiting. It waits with creating the change until all the test results come back.
Yeah. So
it's just running those tests. So I guess
longer than.
I guess it takes longer than we could fit in now. But I think we're also at the end of the time.
Yeah. And we don't have any other questions directly at the moment.
Yeah, I think the earlier question, as a ServiceNow partner or developer, what is the best way to use the citizen developer approach for our clients? I think actually that was probably the framework that I showed, that there's a lot of different practices that you can help our customers with. I would say it's sort of an open door, but start with something small, right? Start with a small little app, try it out, try the capabilities and see if it really works. And then of course, if it works out, just build it out. Of course, if you need any more advice on that platformation, we're always here to help. So feel free to reach out if you want further guidance on that. We've been doing this with a lot of customers already, and we've also learned which things not to do. So we're happy to bring that experience to the table.
Okay, Guus, I think we are over the top of the hour. Thanks a lot for working together with me on this.
Absolutely.
And of course, we are both available for follow-up if necessary. And we are happy for the people who joined today and wanted to share their information with us. And maybe the next time.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for your time, and cheers.
Have a nice day.